What's going on, everybody? This is JohnJake Gaming on the mic here, coming at you with a brand new episode of the Conference USA Dynasty here on EA College Football 25. We find ourselves here already in the first few weeks of the season, and we're getting to that point where we are starting to wrap up non-conference play, and we're starting to see that trickling in of conference games as we go ahead and move into that more important part of the schedule where it's really make or break for many of the teams within this conference. And in this episode, we'll probably have 2 weeks of action to cover. We'll have week number 4 action where we'll see the likes of Liberty play multiple times, Mid-Tennessee, see if they can continue to build upon their first win this season, as well as Sam Houston hosting Florida State, and Jacksonville State looking to remain undefeated as well. We'll see if Jacksonville State can continue to build its bid to get into the top 25 ranks. And then, we'll have that week number 5 action as well, where, we'll start to see that true wrap up of the non-conference slate. So, should be a fun episode here, man. We're gonna have multiple weeks of action to cover, and I hope you guys are excited for it, man, because I certainly am. If you are, make sure you go ahead, smack that like button, hit that subscribe button as well if you happen to be brand new, and we're gonna go ahead and get things started here with a Wednesday night game between the Liberty Flames and the UTEP Miners. Alright, boys, so we will go ahead and get things rolling here with number 20th ranked Liberty making the road trip down to El Paso, Texas in order to take on this UTEP Miners squad. And, down here in the Sun Bowl, I was hoping that this was going to be a day game. Would love to see those mountains in the background, but we got ourselves a mostly packed house here in the Sun Bowl as they are ready to take down their conference rivals who, are trying to make that second consecutive trip to the college football playoffs. So definitely are going to see if UTEP can go ahead and can they play some spoiler. But we'll pick things up late in the first quarter as Caden Salter lines up under center. It's a play action, fires over the middle, and he finds a man in the end zone. Touchdown, Liberty! And Jenkins is going to get the first touchdown on the board here in this Conference USA matchup. And just elementary for Jacob Jenkins, a senior tight end, just finding that soft spot in the coverage. And the rest was history there. So Liberty will end up taking an early lead. But midway through the second quarter, though, UTEP with an opportunity to tie. They had a decent drive going and puts the ball on the ground, though. What an insane turn of events. Just streaking his way into the end zone. Another touchdown for the Liberty Flames. And you just hate to see it, man. I mean, you gotta hate the fact that they give up that kind of play. That's a 14-point swing. UTEP was putting together a decent drive, so now a little bit behind the 8 ball here as UTEP desperately needs a response, and they're gonna get their response right back. Touchdown, UTEP! And the Miners are gonna pull to within just a touchdown of the number 20th ranked team in all of college football. You love to see it. What a throw to Ashton Nickelberry, the senior wide receiver. And all of a sudden, boys, we might have a little bit of a fight on our hands. You think Liberty was just going to cruise through Conference USA? I don't necessarily think so. But don't get it twisted, this team has some firepower as James Joyner Jr. nearly finds the end zone. He's going to get it inside the 5-yard line as he is already going to possess well over 100 yards on the day. He's on the miss of a breakout performance, but Caden Salter, he's going to be one to finish this drive out. All day to throw, just takes it himself. Dolphin dives into the end zone. Most of the time when you see those dolphin dives into the end zone, it does not necessarily work out. But thank goodness that we found the way. He found the way to find the end zone and hold on to the ball in the process as a senior quarterback is going to, in fact, give Liberty a 27-10 lead. Nice running lane as well. Meanwhile, jumping into the fourth quarter of action, we'll see UTEP go to work here as quarterback's going to drop back to throw, facing some pressure, cast to eat the sack as Liberty has absolutely been all over this UTEP offensive line. They have struggled tremendously in terms of protecting the quarterback, as now it leads to a 4th and goal situation from the 26-yard line. What do they got? Can they find a way to convert a 4th and 26? And they somehow do. You cannot be serious right now. They find a way to convert a 4th and 26, man. Absolutely crazy work. As a sophomore wide receiver, Raphael Campbell is going to be able to find a way to find the end zone. And so, with that being said, UTEP, with less than 2 minutes left to play, they have an opportunity to tie the game and maybe force overtime as it's turning into a foot race down the left hash. He's going to be gone like a girl in a country song. Touchdown, UTEP! And the Miners are just going to be an extra point away from taking the number 20th ranked team in the nation and taking them to overtime here in the Sun Bowl Stadium. I mean, look at this throw. This was, a nice throw. Just protect the receiver, anticipating that big hit, but the safety whiffs. He whiffs on the big hit completely, and it ends up being a catastrophic error. And so that means we are going to, in fact, have overtime. Now, first overtime, nothing too crazy. Both teams do extend field goals, so that's how we get to the second overtime, where Caden Salter, he's going to find his senior tight end once again, finds the end zone here, and it's going to be a touchdown for Liberty. But now that we are in that second overtime, the story doesn't necessarily end here now, does it? Because what I will say is that they have to go for the 2-point conversion. So we'll see what Liberty comes up with here on their second overtime. Going to go ahead and run it with James Joyner Jr., who dives into the end zone. And so that does, in fact, mean that not only does UTEP, they need a touchdown, but they'll also need the 2-point conversion. But they'll get one of those pieces of the formula, a touchdown for the Miners, as that is going to pull the Miners within 2, finding the freshman tight end, Martavius Collins, in the back of the end zone. And just a beautiful throw there as well, as now UTEP needs a 2-point conversion in order to keep this game going. Looking over to the left-hand side, and he finds an open man. And with that being said, we are now going to go to a third overtime, where right away we see the ball deflected. And if Liberty scores here on their very next 2-point attempt, then Liberty is going to escape the Sun Bowl with the victory. Here we go for the game. In the third overtime, they try to run for it and get stuffed. The defensive line is going to be able to hold. And that does end up meaning that we are, in fact, going to be needing a 4th overtime all of a sudden. So here we are, overtime number 4, and Liberty is back out onto the field. Salter dropping back, he's going to go ahead, sparks the gap, and he's going to score. And Liberty makes it a 40-38 ball game, thanks to the senior quarterback, Caden Salter. So now UTEP has a chance to answer. This is the force overtime number 5. Looking, facing some pressure, has to roll to the left and gets sacked. It's over. Liberty is going to, in fact, survive as the Flames do end up winning 40-38. And really, what a classic that we were absolutely blessed with here in the first game of this episode, with Caden Salter being named player of the game. He had a good performance with 230 yards, 3 passing touchdowns. including some big plays thrown in there in between. You know, had to make some things shake out, as both of these teams were definitely even, but Liberty just wanted it a little bit more. So let's see if the other games in this episode can live up to the fireworks that we just witnessed down in the Sun Bowl, as Mid-Tennessee State is going to be hosting Marshall. Now, in real life, Marshall did not have the massive exodus that they've experienced out in the transfer portal. And so, with that being said, both teams are taking the field. Not as many fans in the crowd as what I would say was in the Sun Bowl, but Johnny Red Floyd Stadium is ready to be rocking. As Mid-Tennessee State, they're searching to get back to 500, while Marshall, coming in with a 3-0 record, they're looking to remain undefeated and possibly be a dark horse to be the G5 representative in the college football playoff. And it starts with a big-time throw out to the right-hand side. And he was wide, butt naked open, and it leads to the very first points of the game. Taking a little bit longer than what we saw in our first matchup of this episode, but Brian Robinson, the senior wide receiver, was in fact able to get open, and so the rest was history after that. Jumping into later in the second quarter, Marshall trying to build upon that lead as they're up 10-0 now, and they have another deep shot, this time over to the left-hand side. Mid-Tennessee State, the DBs are absolutely getting cooked. This is like what we saw in the national championship game in real life when Jeremiah Smith had that one-on-one coverage. Certainly not the same caliber of the receiver, but achieving those same results anyways. Tyson Chamble able to beat double coverage, it looks like, even beating the safety over the top. And so Marshall now with a tremendous lead, up 20-0. And you can see by how these guys are moving into no huddle that there is certainly some urgency in this offense, and we're definitely getting it here down the sideline, and it's gonna go for a massive play, but we're going to get Mid-Tennessee State in the red zone for the very first time today. And this offense, or this crowd, was just looking for literally anything to cheer about. Alas, the drive will end up stalling in the red zone now a few plays later. So while Mid-Tennessee State is able to get points on the board for the very first time, as you can see by what you're seeing on the scoreboard, it is a long climb back if they want to try to win this thing. But Luther Richardson, the new starting quarterback for this Blue Raiders squad, well, that quarterback is certainly starting to find a rhythm. And let it be known, he's certainly starting to cook. Getting the Blue Raiders inside the 5-yard line. Going play action. Very next play, and finds a wide open receiver down the field. And finally, the Blue Raiders are going to find the end zone for the very first time today, finding the freshman tight end. But here's the kicker. They're also going to go for the 2-point conversion. This would make it a 2-score game, but alas, the 2-point conversion ends up being no good, and so it ends up being an 18-point game. Still a long road to try to come back from, as Marshall will take back over, but Love is going to enjoy getting the Braxton in the backfield, able to bring him down for a significant loss. The freshman defensive end making an impact, and at least forcing a third down attempt. Braxton firing to the left-hand side. It's intercepted! The Blue Raiders create a turnover that they have desperately needed. Huge play, and the Blue Raiders are, in fact, going to have an opportunity to get right back into the game. And again, it's just forcing pressure on the quarterback, and that's how you get her done. So, with that being said, do they actually end up doing anything? Well, not really. They end up going 3 and out. Marshall ends up getting a field goal in the next possession. So now it gets into real desperation times here in the fourth quarter. They do get that touchdown here. And I'm sure that they'll go for the extra point instead of going for the 2-point. Well, actually, no. I miscounted. They'll probably go for the 2-point conversion shortly. But even if you are successful for the 2-point conversion, you are going to have to get at least one more touchdown and score on another separate possession. Really is a very thin margin of error for this Blue Raiders squad. And it turns out they actually did settle for the extra point. Interesting decision there. Figured that they would go ahead and pull off the 2-point conversion then and there. But that's not necessarily how things always shake out, right? And after this touchdown right here of 11:47 left to go, this game fundamentally should be over. Trayshawn Chapman is able to get behind the defense a second time. I mean, the man-to-man coverage is simply not working at all. And so now it's back to being an 18-point game. Luther Richardson, he's got a cook, and this should do it. This is going to be returned all the way back, and it's a touchdown. That's Datomi Smith able to read the eyes of Luther Richardson, and the 27-yard pick six is going to set Marshall up nicely. Going to be up by 25 points here in this final quarter of action. But with that being said, don't count this Blue Raiders team out. They do get a couple of scores, and then on this throw over to the right-hand side, they get open on the perimeter. And all of a sudden, chat, we have ourselves a very interesting game on our hands. This is not over officially yet. This is the craziness of college football officially in full effect right now, as that's the senior wide receiver, Kellen Stewart, who's able to get open. Not a great throw at all by Luther Richardson. I'm actually surprised of how bad of a ball that was, but hey, senior wide receiver still was able to adjust. And all of a sudden, after being down by 25 in this quarter, they're now just a 2-point conversion away from making it a field goal game. Luther looking, and it's gonna be brought down in the backfield. So the 2-point conversion is not going to be good, and fundamentally, they're gonna need a stop defensively. Otherwise, it will be barbecue chicken, but it turns out they will actually get that stop that they're looking for. And 1:19 left to play. They actually have a chance to win this thing, and Luther Richardson finds a man in the end zone. Touchdown, Raiders! Down by 25 at one point, and Camp is going to be the guy that's going to officially cap being brought all the way back, as the senior tight end was able to use that big basketball body in order to find the end zone one last time. But the million-dollar question is, are they going to go for two? And it looks like they will. If they get this 2-point conversion, that means that they cannot lose on a field goal, which is important because Marshall still has all of their timeouts firing, and the 2-point conversion is good. And matter of fact, the Blue Raiders are actually going to hang on and win. 47-44 ends up being your final score. Richardson gets named player of the game, throwing for over 500 yards. He was lighting things up on the scoreboard, as this was a very offensively gifted matchup, one that was certainly for the ages. And so Marshall actually suffers a first loss as a result of that. And speaking of teams that are also trying to avoid their first loss of the season, Sam Houston, starting off the season pretty reasonably well, is going to be taking on their head coach, who is now a defensive coordinator at Florida State. And so because of that, Florida State has actually agreed to come down to Sam Houston, Texas, to take on these Cardiac Cats. We're going to start the season out 3-0 and, get some good competition in before we go ahead and get started with the bulk of conference play. But, finding out right away, but there's just simply certain throws that you can get away with in Conference USA action that you cannot necessarily get away with when you're taking on a power conference opponent, even a team that was perpetually as disappointing as the Seminoles of Florida State. As Marvin Jones Jr., that is a defensive end that is able to climb up into the heavens and make that interception, I mean, you don't see a lot of defensive ends, regardless of whether it's at the power conference level or at the group of 5, able to make those types of plays. And right away, Florida State immediately showing why they are the superior football team, at least on paper. Because within the first 5 minutes of this ball game, we do immediately see that Florida State is going to, in fact, punch Sam Houston right in the mouth, right? It is going to be a 10-0 lead after the Hakeem Williams touchdown. As a matter of fact, they have a chance to score again, and they find the end zone once again, and it's quickly turning into a potential splattering for Florida State, showing their muscle against an inferior G5 opponent, trying to boost that resume slightly, or at least make that record look good. But even though Florida State does jump out to a 17-0 lead, we'll just have to go ahead and wait and see if that is going to be enough, as there's certainly a lot of football that is still left to be played. And it seems like Sam Houston is going to be the same old, you know, just having a very difficult time dealing with that front 7 of the Florida State defensive line, but still able to navigate things enough to get a goal line situation for the first time today. And Sam Houston will also find the end zone for the first time today as well. Touchdown for the Sam Houston Cardiac Cats. And with that being said, that does end up meaning that Sam Houston will be on the board for the very first time, courtesy of the senior running back John Gentry, cutting this deficit down to 10 points. Meanwhile, later on in the second quarter, Florida State was able to tack on a field goal, but once again, John Gentry is going to get another carry right up the gut, and that's going to be a touchdown for the Sam Houston Cardiac Cats. And all of a sudden here, guys, after thinking originally, hey, Florida State could run these guys out of the building, we could be looking at a much different story as John Gentry gets his second rushing touchdown of the day. And we got ourselves a battle on our hands, one that Florida State is not going to give up on very easily, I would say, as Florida State will find the end zone there as well. That's going to be a touchdown for the Florida State Seminoles, as they'll once again find the end zone. But shaping up to be a very entertaining game, actually, even though, you know, we thought this was originally, you know, had that potential to be a blowout after Florida State jumps to that 17-0 lead. But John Gentry seems like he is doing literally everything possible right now to keep these guys in the game. That is the third rushing touchdown for John Gentry. And with that, Sam Houston is going to pull within a field goal. This has some serious upset potential right now, and this would be a massive resume boost, even though Florida State hasn't been the same kind of team ever since their ACC championship run back in 2023. But with less than 2 minutes left to go, Sam Houston's going to score again. Oh my goodness, the Cardiac Cats have just taken the lead against mighty Florida State. Oh my goodness. You want to talk about a miracle on ice moment? We could be seeing one right in front of our eyes right now as Derek Bledsoe III, the sophomore wide receiver, able to get wide butt naked open, just split the cover two. It wasn't even that complex of a route at all. Literally just ran a go route right in between those two. And so with that, we are looking at a 4-point lead, and now Florida State, they need some help on the other side with a massive gain as Brock Glenn throws a dart for a massive first down as well, getting into the red zone. Can Sam Houston come out and make a defiant stand? Couple plays later, Brock Glenn in the shotgun, drops back, fires over the middle, and finds a receiver in the middle of the end zone. Touchdown. Florida State was thrown a little bit high, but it doesn't necessarily matter though, as Brock Glenn is going to throw his third touchdown pass as he's able to connect to the sophomore wide receiver, Jalen Brown. As that is going to be the final points that we see being scored as Florida State is able to survive on the road. They will narrowly take down your Sam Houston Cardiac Cats. 34-31 being your final score as Roydell Williams, the senior running back, is able to get player of the game. A very even game after the first quarter of action, but Florida State just made slightly more plays when it mattered the most. So, the final game that I wanted to look at here in week number 4 is the Ohio Bobcats making the road trip down to Jacksonville, Alabama, in order to take on the Gamecocks of Jacksonville State. Should be an intriguing non-conference matchup as Jacksonville State continues to try and build some momentum as they prepare for life for Conference USA action. As you know, Jacksonville State is currently undefeated right now, while Ohio, on the other hand, are our friends from that coveted MACtion. Well, they're searching for their first win of the season after starting 0-3. Meanwhile, Jacksonville State with that 3-0 record themselves, as they actually get attacked in the backfield. So this will make a 3rd and 16 very difficult as the senior defensive end, Bradley Weaver. He was able to get home, did a very nice job with that inside swing move. So now we'll see what Zion, Turner, and company can come up with here late in the first quarter of action. Zion looking. He's going to try to drop back, but he gets sacked again. Is that going to knock Jacksonville State out of field goal range? Well, I am not 100% sure. One thing that I can say for certain is that Bradley Weaver is one bad man. That is the 2nd sack that Bradley Weaver has taken, and that is going to set up a 52-yard field goal. Definitely not the chip shot that this kicker thought he was going to have just a couple of plays ago, but he is not going to be rattled by any stretch of the imagination, as the field goal is still going to be up, and it is good. So that will give Jacksonville State a 3-0 lead before we jump into the second quarter, where we'll finally see Zion Turner and this offense find the end zone for a early touchdown, as Vaughn was able to win off of the line instantly. Back shoulder fade was ran to perfection, and that is how Jacksonville State is going to end up getting its first touchdown of the afternoon, as Cam Vaughn, presented himself as open, and Zion Turner put it where it needed to go, as the Jacksonville State Gamecocks continue to try to build this lead up, and this time they're going to do it on the ground. So they're able to accomplish things through the air. Well, they're also able to accomplish things on the ground as well, as Jacksonville State able to run on that Ohio front 7 with relative ease. When it gets down there on the goal line, it just becomes a battle of wills, and Andrew Paul and company just had a little bit more willpower when it's all said and done. And it also puts Ohio in a very precarious position, already down 17-0 and needing a play downfield, but it's not going to happen. It's intercepted, and Jacksonville State is going to take over at about the 30-yard line with less than 4 minutes left to go. And at this point in this first half, you have to imagine that you're just trying to do some damage control at this point. It has been a nightmare of a first half for the Ohio Bobcats. Make no mistake about it. And with that, that is what your halftime score ends up being, 17-0. Now, the good news is that at the very least, you do get the ball to start this second half. But if you're Ohio, you have to imagine that this particular drive is a massive drive to start the second half. You have to come away with points, and you were able to get down here at least deep in Jacksonville territory on your last possession. However, it turned into a turnover, but thankfully we'll have a wildly different result this time around if you are pulling for the Ohio Bobcats this time around, as Ohio is going to wound up with their first score today, able to connect with Rodney Harrison II, as then later in the third quarter, gonna actually find the end zone a second time. So really, it just goes to show how dramatically things can change in this beautiful sport that is college football. Because just a few moments ago, you could have sworn that Ohio was just dead on arrival. They had nothing that they could have done. But now that Rodney Harris II has been able to get his second receiving touchdown of the afternoon, suddenly this Ohio team does in fact have a little bit of life. So it just makes you wonder if Jacksonville State does have a response, as Zion looks over to the right-hand side. He's going to connect with his superstar receiver, going inside the 15-yard line, as it will set up a Jacksonville State field goal as the drive would stall shortly after. But the Gamecocks do come away with points for the first time since jumping out to that 17-0 lead. And with 6 minutes left to play in the fourth quarter, the lead does now seem somewhat safe, as I actually have no idea, looking back at it, how that was not intercepted, because the DB actually does an outstanding job of jumping that particular route. It's just that I don't know if it was like he was there early and just didn't stop his feet after that, or what he was thinking necessarily. But what I will say is that Ohio got very fortunate, because this should have been going the other way. Let's keep it real for a second. I mean, I just don't know what 13 was doing. And to top it all off, he doesn't even make the tackle. Nobody makes the tackle in an open field. So that being said, 2 minutes left to play. Ohio gets the ball back once again, and a chance for Ohio to take the lead, and they get it. So Ohio takes the lead late after looking dead in the water in the first half. And all of a sudden, they look like they are going to be just a couple of minutes away from winning their first game of the 2025 campaign, as Chase Hendricks, the junior wide receiver, found that very soft spot in the zone coverage. It has to be zone. No way was that man covered by any stretch of the imagination. And so with that being said, Ohio is going to go for the 2-point conversion. We'll see if they get it, as they'll go ahead, and it's going to be a run up the gut, and it's going to be access denied. So Jacksonville State can in fact win on a field goal. We'll see how the Gamecocks attack this drive, as it looks like Zion Turner is going to start throwing the ball over the middle and picking up a first down. But a few plays later, facing a fourth down, gotta convert it, and they don't get it. They will fail to get the fourth down conversion, and Ohio is going to stun Jacksonville State, outscoring them in the second half 27-9. A game that I previously thought was in the bag. Well, that was certainly not the case, as Colin Whitfer, the junior quarterback for Ohio, does garner player of the game honors, throwing for over 350 yards and 4 touchdown passes, while also simultaneously handing Jacksonville State their very first loss of 2025. But then the other games that we had in week number 4, it was not a great week for certain teams in our conference, you know, in those not as nationally televised games. For example, Louisiana Tech had their rivalry game against Southern Miss and just looked completely unprepared to play in this one, as Southern Miss dominates 34-3. Being your final score. The Bulldogs, we did not get a single third down or fourth down conversion, not to mention they turned the ball over on 4 separate occasions. It was just an all-around awful performance against Southern Miss, as Louisiana Tech does fall to 1-3 on the season. Kennesaw State was at least able to beat FCS Les 35-7, and Kennesaw State will finish its non-conference with a 2-1 record, which is pretty respectable for this Owls program, who's now in their second year in the FBS. And then FIU is able to go on the road and conference play and take down New Mexico State 27-9. FIU was a team that, you know, looked much more prepared to play, as New Mexico State kind of rolling off of that high of upsetting Indiana, who was ranked in the top 10 at the time, comes out in the conference opener and just looks completely unprepared to play, realizing that, hey, you know, maybe they celebrated that Indiana win a little bit too much. In terms of how things are going in terms of getting respectability from the mainstream media, Liberty does end up climbing up a few spots to number 17 in the nation after a 4 overtime game against UTEP. We'll see them again later in this episode. They'll take on Old Dominion in a little bit. Indiana does jump up to number 19. That's notable because that is considered a really quality win for New Mexico State. And then also Northwestern does jump into the top 25 after starting the year off 3-0. They're now 24 in the nation. Just taking a look to see if there's anyone else that's receiving votes at this time, and it doesn't look like that is the case. There is no other teams in the Conference USA that are either ranked or receiving votes at this time. And then Brantley Weaver, who took part in that Jacksonville State game and helped them with that 27-26 win that we just saw, he actually does end up getting National Player of the Week on the defensive side of the ball with those 6 tackles and 3 sacks over the course of the game. In terms of how things went for the Conference USA, TJ Bush Jr. gets named Defensive Player of the Week in that 4 overtime performance, having those 8 tackles and 2 sacks in that 4 overtime win for Liberty. And then on the offensive side of the ball, John Gentry gets the nod. They did partake in a loss to Florida State, but John Gentry looked amazing in that Florida State game. 150 yards on the ground, 55 receiving yards, and 3 total touchdowns. He definitely balled out and nearly allowed Sam Houston to remain undefeated and might have received votes if they would have been that Florida State team, who is a member of the Power 4, of course. But with that being said, let's go ahead and kick off week number 5, as we'll start week number 5 action watching a couple of teams that we saw last week. Mid-Tennessee State is going to travel to take on Sam Houston, and for both of these teams, we saw them play in very exciting games back in week number 4, but with slightly different results. Sam Houston playing an extremely competitive game against Florida State, but just could not come out on top. Meanwhile, for Mid-Tennessee State, they was down by up to 25 points against Marshall, and they were able to find a way to make the comeback happen. So very interesting to see how things shake out. We'll see if Sam Houston can avoid their first losing streak of the year, while the Blue Raiders are also trying to get above 500 for the first time in the 2025 campaign. But with first being said, Sam Houston is going to get off to a quick start. They get a quick drive to start things off here in week number 5, as the Cardiac Cats are going to connect with Simeon Evans, a senior wide receiver. Just a simple curl pattern, is able to win on his route with relative ease, and the Blue Raiders cannot respond. So a chance for Sam Houston to jump ahead early, but they're going to put the ball on the ground, and Mid-Tennessee State is going to recover. Parker Hughes was able to land on the ball, and because of that, the Blue Raiders are going to start off inside the 30-yard line of Sam Houston, and this crowd is absolutely stunned. However, the Blue Raiders can't fully take advantage of that opportunity because they are actually going to go ahead and settle for a field goal there. And so because they did have to settle for that field goal, we are going to see them only down 7-3. Could have been a tied ball game, but as the kids would say, it is what it is. However, thanks to those lucky stars, the Blue Raiders will find other opportunities to score, and that will include a nice little jet pass to one of the receivers there on the perimeter, able to wiggle his way into the end zone, as Kellen Stewart is going to be able to provide Mid-Tennessee State the lead. As we'll now jump midway through the second quarter of action, as Sam Houston putting together a solid little drive, not a liquid or a gas, as the offensive player of the week back in week number 4 is going to be able to find a scamper into the end zone. Touchdown, Sam Houston! And the Cardiac Cats are going to be able to jump up to the lead again, as John Gentry is going to score his 4th rushing touchdown in the last couple of weeks. He has absolutely been on a tear, but not enough of a tear to let Sam Houston pull away. As a matter of fact, we actually are still going to have a hotly contested game on our hands, as Lacey is going to be able to find a soft spot in that zone coverage inside the 10-yard line. And after a successful extra point, the sophomore receiver Cameron Lacey is going to find a window for Luther Richardson to throw through. And that actually won't be the only opportunity for Mid-Tennessee to put points on the board, as they did get the ball with 40 seconds left, but it ends in disaster. A disaster that can't even be Richardson's fault. It was in the hands of the receiver. And David Fisher, man, he just happened to be in the right place at the exact right time as well. And it quickly shows as well. So a huge play there at the end of the half. And it's not even done yet. Mid-Tennessee actually tried to go forth and try to put points on the board before the end of the half. But this also ends in disaster. A second turnover for the Blue Raiders with 5 seconds left. I mean, you legitimately had one job. Do not put the ball on the ground. And Malik Love makes him forget what the assignment was. And so they actually will have a chance to put points on the board before halftime. They'll settle for a 37-yard field goal. Definitely don't want to push your luck at this rate. And the field goal attempt is indeed going to be good. So the Blue Raiders will only be down by 4 points at the half. So with that being said, midway through the third quarter of action, as Richardson fires to the left-hand side, he finds another receiver in the end zone. Touchdown Raiders! And they will officially take the lead over them Cardiac Cats. And they are simply stunned out here in Sam Houston, Texas, as Kellen Stewart, the senior wide receiver, with his second score of the day, also capitalizing on a jet pass earlier today. And so that brings us into the fourth quarter, where things can certainly slide in either direction. 27 all your score, but that's not going to last forever, as Kellen Stewart is going to be a menace to the Sam Houston campus. His third touchdown today, and Mid-Tennessee takes the lead early in this fourth quarter of action. And while there's still plenty of ball left to play, you can tell that the Blue Raiders have control of that momentum right about now. But how long will it last? Midway through the fourth quarter, Sam Houston looking to respond on a 4th and goal, but they are going to be stuffed in the backfield, and Sam Houston cannot score. They will not be able to score on that 4th down attempt. And so that means that their clock is dwindling. Mid-Tennessee can't fully take advantage, but they're a one stop away from seeing a mild upset go down in the Conference USA. Especially after that particular turnover as well on downs, as Malik Love goes absolutely nuts. And the Blue Raiders would go on and win 37-27, being your final score. And the Blue Raiders being a pleasant surprise here early in this 2025 campaign, after losing their starting quarterback to the transfer portal this past offseason. Well, they just beat Sam Houston, who is predicted to be one of the better teams in this entire conference. Meanwhile, Liberty is going to make the field trip out to Norfolk, Virginia, to take on Old Dominion, home of the Monarchs. And I'll say this about Old Dominion. You know, they have honestly one of the nicer uniform combos. I would say like a slept-on uniforms out at the G5 level. Their football team does not reflect that, though. The Old Dominion football team has not been great, but it is rivalry week, and you know how things can go when it comes to these rivalry games. Anything can absolutely go down. We'll just have to wait and see if it could happen in this particular ball game, as Caden Salter early on having a hard time dealing with the pressure. And on the first drive of the game, they're already going to have to deal with a 3rd and 19 with their backs happen to be down by the goal line as well. So just an absolute disaster of a first drive. So we'll see if Caden Salter can create some magic as the top quarterback in the Conference USA from an overall standpoint. Salter with a little bit more time, fires over the right-hand side, finds a receiver for a huge play, and that will carry the Liberty Flames across midfield. So on a 3rd and 19, they're still going to be able to convert for a first down anyways. And that's going to lead to a goal line situation later on in the first quarter, where we see a Dolphin dive for James Joyner Jr. as Liberty will draw first blood in this rivalry matchup between Liberty and Old Dominion here in the great state of Virginia. And with that being said, that is how you silence a crowd. And it is a close to full capacity crowd here at Old Dominion, so I gotta give credit where credit is due. But with that being said, James Joyner, with a nasty spin move, and he's off to the races. Gone like a girl in a country song. Touchdown, Liberty! And the Flames are gonna score yet again. Oh my goodness, James Joyner Jr. going absolutely insane. And with that being said, Liberty is going to take a quick 14-0 lead. And take a look at this spin move. Oh! Put him in out of his sneakers. Just absolutely diabolical work, man. Oh my goodness. And now Liberty with a distinct advantage. We'll see if they can keep pressuring it as they face yet another 3rd and long. Salter fires over the middle, finds another receiver, but this time, this particular receiver is going to be brought down from behind. But another explosive play for this Liberty offense, and it seems like they are borderline unstoppable right now. Salter, 3rd and 11. This time, that is a right-handed quarterback throwing to his left and still delivering a great ball. Keep in mind, these are not like default sliders. This is like the sliders where like the QB accuracy is set at like a 5 or a 10. You know, check out the first episode if you don't believe me, because I haven't touched the sliders ever since. Oh man, that is a big time play. And it looks like Liberty is going to get another one of those big time plays, because as Old Dominion was driving down the length of the field, we are going to see Liberty forcing a fumble, and they are also going to procure a fumble recovery as well. That is CJ Brazil Jr. able to land on the ball. And now 3rd and long, trying to find any semblance of rhythm if you're on the Old Dominion side. It's been an absolute nightmare of the first half. But, you know, we saw what happened to Ohio earlier in this episode. There is no lead that is truly safe, but at the same token, I just have a really difficult time just imagining that all of a sudden Ole Miss was going to come back from this. I just have an extraordinarily difficult time. I mean, putting up 30 in one half, that's some crazy work, man. Only a select few teams in the country, regardless of whether you play at that group of 5 level or if you're a Power 4 team, that are actually capable of doing just that. And this Liberty team, I don't know what it is, but they certainly got it. Another touchdown will go on the board right before we go into the end of the half as Caden Salter, I mean, he's getting his fair share of passing touchdowns. It's just going to be, you know, like Oprah on one of her shows back in the day. You get a touchdown. You get a touchdown. That random tight end over there, that guy is also going to get a touchdown as well. And it leads to a 41-6 lead for Liberty. But with that being said, it's not all bad. Old Dominion at least does find a way to score one random touchdown. So at least that they can say that. But at the same time, though, man, what a ridiculous showing. Naheem Glenham is going to get the touchdown here. So freshman wide receiver able to be a little bit of a bright spot. But I mean, 41-13, it still doesn't change the fact that Liberty is putting together an absolute masterclass performance right now, and that could continue as Salter delivers over to left-hand side, finds a wide, butt-naked open receiver down the sideline, and gets across the 40-yard line. First down for the Liberty Flames is Caden Salter. I believe, if I saw that correctly, has now over 350 yards passing. And while it does not end in a touchdown drive, like many other drives that we've seen here today, at the same token, though, we will end up seeing Liberty get a field goal. And while Old Dominion is going to get a bunch of points after that, keep in mind, those points were all scored when the backups were in the game. This has nothing to do with what the starters like slacking off, so to speak. A little concerning, like, for the future of Liberty football, but at the same time, it's a good win nonetheless. And now we'll go ahead and see Ohio State, the 13th ranked team in the nation, and your national champions from the 2024 season in real life. I am finished recording this right after the national championship game between Ohio State and Notre Dame, and man, was that a fun one to watch, especially if you are an Ohio State fan. The Ohio State probably feeling good after today, but or yesterday I should say. But here we are in EA College Football with the 2025 season, and Ohio State will be taking on Western Kentucky. But this game, you know, does have some special significances of it, you know, because we are seeing the return of Upton Stout back over to Bowling Green, Kentucky for the very first time since he left the team through the transfer portal and is now going to be a part of this Ohio State squad. So that's a big reason why they're here. Devin Brown, who is still here as the quarterback of Ohio State, he does beat out Julian Sayin for that starting quarterback job, which is wild to think about given how Devin Brown has played in the past. And I mean, he's got that running back number, which is a little interesting. I know it's in honor of somebody, but like, if you're like a really good quarterback, you're not wearing number 33. Like, I'm sorry, like, it just ain't happening. But Devin Brown, he's doing his thing here. He already has a passing touchdown, and then he is also able to connect, you know, with many of the talented receivers that Ohio State does have, and that does include, but not limited to, of course, Carnell Tate. And he's not even the he's not even like the main attraction, you know. And Carnell Tate, like, he could genuinely be, you know, a wide receiver one in several places across the country. Not here necessarily, but with that being said, Ohio State, they are getting them Texas Roadhouse biscuits out because they are certainly on a roll to start this ball game. Did have to settle for field goal, unfortunately, which is a little bit, you hate to see it, but Ohio State is going to have a 10-0 lead regardless, as now Ohio State now up 10-0, going to drop back, and Devin Brown is actually going to be sacked. Big play by the Hilltopper defense, able to at least drive him back a little bit because, I mean, let's be honest with ourselves, it has genuinely been all Ohio State here in this first quarter of action, and that sack was actually enough to get him into a 3rd and long that Devin Brown could not complete, and so Ohio State would have to settle for yet another field goal. So, but with that being said, given the amount of talent that is on this Ohio State roster, you know that eventually it feels like the dam was going to break, and we might start seeing it here as Devin Brown is going to find the end zone for the 2nd time today. Touchdown, Ohio State, and the Buckeyes, well, they are going to be jumping out to a 20-0 lead, which, you know, Western Kentucky shouldn't feel bad because this is what they've done to even the elite teams in college football. And Jelani Thompson's able to box out the much smaller defender. And now Ohio State already up 20-0. Well, it's just about to get so much worse as there's going to be a dot thrown to the right-hand side. Another explosive play right before we go into the halftime locker room as Brandon Ennis, another one of those 5-star receivers who we already know is a certified bad man. Brandon Ennis, this time a junior wide receiver, starting to get his opportunity with Emmanuel Abuka leaving the team because he is chasing that NFL dream. And with that being said, Brandon Ennis showing why he's an absolute stud as well. So 27-0 is officially your score, as Devin Brown will try to throw over the right-hand side once again and is going to pick up the first down there. Big drive here for both teams here, just trying to do a little bit of damage control of your Western Kentucky. Brown fires over the right-hand side, finds a receiver, doesn't quite get out of bounds. So it'll be very interesting to see what they end up deciding to do if they were to go into no huddle. So, I mean, they're not really huddling, so I imagine that they are going to settle for a field goal, which they do after 3 consecutive incompletions. Kick is up through the air, and it is good, but just an absolute splattering out here in Bowling Green, Kentucky. And we are looking at a 30-0 lead at the half before finally we see a little bit of a sparkle of hope here. Western Kentucky finally putting something together here in the second half. Not sure. Actually, yes, the starters are actually still in for Ohio State. After, you see splatterings like that, you don't know if the starters are going to remain that much longer. But I will say is that Caden Weidkamp, man, he's just had a really rough day today. He hasn't turned the ball over, so got to give him credit where credit is due. But, I mean, his team is simply overmatched. It's going to be a good learning experience. Going to toughen them up for Conference USA action, which, for many of these teams in the Conference USA, that's the most important part. Many of these teams know that they actually do not have any sort of chance, I would say, of going out and actually competing for a national championship. So if they can be extremely high up in Conference USA, go to a bowl game, do really well in the bowl game, then that is going to be considered an absolute positive. And that's really all that you can do. Just really try to figure out what this team is truly made of. And Ohio State, I don't think anyone is going to be really surprised by this result at all, but Ohio State is going to win this one with great ease. They're going to end up winning 40-17. Alright, so we got through another week here, and we have a few games that happen outside of the nationally televised matchups. Louisiana Tech just continues to struggle through this season. We felt that this was something that was a strong possibility, but this was more of a case of a team that just collapsed in that fourth quarter. Look what transpired in the fourth quarter of action. Just a complete meltdown as Tulsa was, in fact, able to pull away. It was only 16-14 at the end of 3 quarters, but with this loss, Louisiana Tech is now just 1-4 and needs a strong conference showing in order to get invited to a bowl game at the end of the season. However, New Mexico State, in the battle of the Rio Rancho rivalry between New Mexico State and Mountain West opponent New Mexico State was actually able to come out on top. The Aggies win 31-28, and while New Mexico State has not looked good in conference play necessarily, at the same time, though, we do see this New Mexico State team, they look good in non-conference play. They're now 3-2 and just looking to build some momentum going into the core of conference play. And then finally, we saw Kennesaw State and UTEP do battle in the late night, and Kennesaw State is able to pull off another one. So the Owls do get their opener in Conference USA action. They beat UTEP 34-16, and a UTEP team that I thought was building some momentum. They look good in that Utah State game. They took Liberty to the brink. That is not looking like a good look for UTEP at all, or at least for Liberty at all, as UTEP, I should say, falls to now just 1-3 on the season, while Kennesaw State looks a lot more promising. They're now 3-1. As for where Liberty ended up in the top 25, here's where this edition of the top 25 is ending up. Georgia, no longer number 1 in the country. They did end up losing to Texas, so they did have a pretty significant drop, I would say. But Liberty does move up a couple of spots. They did move up 2 spots. The Old Dominion score doesn't look great, but we were blowing them out going to the end of the third quarter. Gotta realize that. Indiana, a team that New Mexico State has beaten. They're still ranked for right now. They're number 17 in the nation. And then we do have a new challenger from the group of 5. Tulane does get in at number 23 in the country. This is the first time they've been ranked this season. But as of right now, Liberty does control their own destiny in terms of being that group of 5 representative for the college football playoff at the end of the year. And then we actually do have a National Defensive Player of the Week from our conference. It's Malik Love, who, had a forced fumble and recovered his own fumble as well alongside 3 sacks. Malik Love did really help pull off that upset against Sam Houston, forcing the Bearcats now on a 2-game losing streak, while Taylor Tatum was able to dominate in their FCS matchup. As for the Offensive Player of the Week, it does end up going to Kellen Stewart, who also played in that Sam Houston game that we saw. Stewart went off, man, 10 catches for 71 yards, but 3 of those catches did end up being touchdowns as well. So a dominating performance for Kellen Stewart, as the Blue Raiders, they might be a pleasant surprise after losing their starting quarterback in the transfer portal. They could be a team that actually somehow could be better than last year from a record standpoint, but season is still young, so a lot to still be determined. Alright, so my original plan was I was going to stop after a couple weeks, but then I took a look at the week number 6 slate, and there's not many games going on. Yes, there is the FIU and UConn game, which is on, local television, but there was a couple of nationally televised games that caught my eye that we could certainly squeeze in. New Mexico State at Western Kentucky, and then UTEP at Middle Tennessee. So with that being said, I think I want to go ahead and get these 2 games in and see if we can make something shake, seeing if either of these Conference USA matchups could provide the same entertainment that we've been seeing all episode. Let's go ahead and jump into that. Alright, man, so with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into week number 6 action between New Mexico State and Western Kentucky. Now, Western Kentucky, we know what happened to them, boys. They got rocked by the Ohio State University, but then we're going to take a look at New Mexico State, and to be honest with you, I am still trying to figure out what New Mexico State is. We see them beat a top 10 Indiana team, but then they've also had some head-scratching performances here in the early part of the 2025 campaign as well. So hopefully this game is going to give us at least a little bit more clarity in terms of, what to expect out of this New Mexico State football team moving forward. As we'll jump into the very first drive of the game, Caden Veinkamp is going to throw over the left-hand side, and he is going to do something that he actually didn't even do in the Ohio State game, and that is throw an interception. And so New Mexico State, right off the bat, is going to be set up inside the 40-yard line, and, this is kind of what they did. This is their formula to beat Indiana as well. And so we'll see if that formula translates pretty well, as now 1st and 10 for New Mexico State. Parker Awan rolls to his right, fires over the middle, and finds a receiver. Touchdown, New Mexico State, and the Aggies are going to, in fact, take the lead. And they will very quickly draw first blood as well. And it's just been a very unfortunate last couple of weeks for Western Kentucky, who has been outscored 47-17 dating back to that last matchup as well. So we'll see if Western Kentucky can in fact pull it together, as late in the first quarter, Caden Veinkamp will find Easton Miller over the middle in order to set up this red zone opportunity, where they'll try to pull a fast one there, trying to go for the halfback draw. But I mean, they were definitely ready for that New Mexico State squad. A well-coached defense for sure, even though they are certainly not the most talented offense on the face of the planet, which is certainly understandable. I mean, hard to convince folks to come to La Cruces, New Mexico, right? But what I will say is that New Mexico State actually does have a 10-6 lead, and with another interception from Caden Veinkamp late in the 4th quarter, that is actually probably going to seal it unless something absolutely insane happens, because technically Western Kentucky could get the ball back, but I mean, it's going to be a hard sell for sure. 50 seconds left. One of those plays, you can run out 40 seconds off the clock for sure. It looks like it is going to, in fact, seeing New Mexico State get that kneel down. And the Aggies, in a very defensive struggle, by the way, they are going to be able to walk into Bowling Green, Kentucky, and hand the Hilltoppers their second consecutive loss. While New Mexico State, they actually might be one of the pleasant surprises in our conference after all. We're going to get to 4-2 after this particular win, and now they're just 2 wins away from bowl eligibility. Meanwhile, UTEP is going on the road to take on Middle Tennessee State as the Blue Raiders are getting ready to do battle. UTEP, we last saw these guys in action in week number 4 as they had a heartbreaking loss and a quadruple overtime performance against the Liberty Flames, who are currently foreseen as the class of this conference. Meanwhile, Mid-Tennessee State, we saw their electric comeback against the Marshall Thundering Herd. We saw them with also an exciting win against Sam Houston. And now we see Mid-Tennessee State on national television for the 3rd week in a row. And once again, this defense for Mid-Tennessee is going to make big plays. As UTEP, they were driving down the length of the field to start this game and was really putting together a methodical drive as well. Not like super big plays by any means, but I mean, Ricky Smith is going to shut that down extremely quickly. So, an opportunity for the Blue Raiders to take advantage of the turnover. Richardson fires to the right-hand side, finds Kellen Smith in the end zone. Touchdown, Blue Raiders. And Kellen Smith is a man that is absolutely on fire right about now, as Kellen Stewart is going to have, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, his 4th receiving touchdown over the course of the last couple of games. So with that being said, Mid-Tennessee now has a 7-0 lead as UTEP's going to try to run the option, able to find a little bit of space, but the ball's on the ground again. It's recovered once more by Mid-Tennessee, and it's going to be 7. Not only is it still 7-0, but Mid-Tennessee, they are coming out and they are ready to play, forcing multiple turnovers in that first quarter of action. Eventually leads to a field goal, and UTEP will now find themselves down 10-0, but certainly not giving up by any means. While UTEP realistically is probably at least a year away from being like a realistic contender in this conference. They do have some pieces, and Skylar Lockwood is certainly one of them, with that pass attempt that he had, taking him over 1,000 passing yards on the season already. This freshman class is a gritty freshman class. It's showing itself already, making some meaningful impacts, even though it may not completely show by how they started the season out by a 1-3 record. But Ezekiel Jolly is one of those guys, is one of those players in that freshman class that are immediately making that contribution, and it actually sparks a little bit of a run for UTEP here, as the Miners, after falling to a 10-0 hole early, well, they will end up responding with the next couple of touchdowns, as Martavius Collins, yet another freshman that we were talking about. I was telling you, this freshman class, it's doing its thing, man. And it gives UTEP a 17-10 lead. Richardson, meanwhile, is dropping back to pass. Is looking over to the left-hand side. He does have a man down the sideline. And Lufer Richardson, who is having a massive day on the score sheet, already over 230 passing yards, is looking to get the Blue Raiders back even. But unfortunately, the drive will stall, and instead of going for it on a 4th and inches, it's not even a goal line situation, they actually settle for the field goal, and they only manage to get 3 points out of that field goal opportunity in the first place. So hopefully that does not come out and the word I'm looking for is, I don't know, spoil, or hopefully that does not come back to haunt them, I would say. I think it's the word that I'm looking for. Because UTEP is right on the doorsteps yet again, and they are going to fire into the end zone yet again for yet another touchdown. UTEP is going to make this a 2-score game, and it makes you wonder what ifs. What if Mid-Tennessee went for it? I mean, it is only 1 inch. You're telling me that you can't get an inch down on the goal line? That's absolutely crazy work. It's Azeel Jolly who's going to get that receiving touchdown once more, as UTEP will go on and they will win 27-13. Mid-Tennessee could not get anything going in that 4th and final quarter of action, as the freshman running back Azeel Jolly is going to be named your player of the game, garnering over 100 receiving yards, a rushing touchdown, and a receiving touchdown as well, as UTEP is able to procure their 2nd win of the year. Alright, man, so last box score that we have here in week number 6 is that we do have UConn taking on FIU at home, and FIU once again really could not pull it out. I mean, just struggling offensively and just really getting out of the gate in general this season. So FIU is going to fall to just 1-4 on this season. Well, UConn is looking pretty good. Maybe a sneaky pick to sneak into the top 25 at some point this year. Now going to be 5-2 on the season, and this UConn team definitely is looking revamped after some really bad years up in the state of Connecticut from a football perspective. Alright guys, so one last check of the top 25 in terms of where we are, starting to get closer to the halfway point of the season. And how about this Liberty Flame squad, man? Really representing well for the Conference USA. They are now considered a top 10 team in the nation. Even after being on bye, they move up 5 spots. So that definitely puts them in that conversation of an at-large. So we might not even need Liberty to get in as a conference champion if they were able to finish like a really strong like end of the year. You know, maybe it is a certain possibility of getting 2 teams into the college football playoff at the end of the season, but certainly need some things to go their way, such as Tulane needs to fade down the stretch. They move up 6 spots to number 17 in the nation, and then, you know, gotta get some other teams in the top 25. Have a few newcomers here in Penn State, Illinois, as well as Colorado. But if you take a look at this other teams receiving votes, we don't have anybody else in the top 25 or even receiving votes outside of Liberty in this conference right now. As for your short players of the week, this is your national players of the week within our conference. But taking a quick look at the Conference USA, it was a shorter week. Terrence Ellis does get defensive player of the week in the Conference USA. Had 10 tackles and a sack in the defensive struggle against New Mexico State. And then Azeel Jolly, the freshman running back out of UTEP, he had a very complete game, over 120 yards of total offense, plus multiple touchdowns as well. Really a complete performance that is starting to get UTEP a little bit more respect around our conference. Alright guys, so I'm looking at what we're looking at in terms of the schedule over the next couple of weeks, and it seems like, you know, definitely can get at least 2 weeks in the next episode, as here is your week number 7 slate or the next episode. Definitely want to keep an eye on teams like Jacksonville State, Sam Houston, and of course Kennesaw State, which that game will likely be simulated. Liberty, of course, has all the pressure of really being that standard bearer for the Conference USA. And then here's also the Week 8 like slate as well. We're going to see UTEP have a non-conference game against Oregon State. You know, a good litmus test to see where UTEP is as a program after being dominated by Texas earlier this year. And then, of course, you know, Western Kentucky, can they start to make a surge in the second half of the season? We'll find out some of these questions and so much more in the next episode. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this one, man. It was nice to be able to get 3 weeks in one episode, and you know, depending on how things shake out, we could get another 3 weeks in the next episode as well. But hey, if you guys enjoyed this one, I need you to go ahead and do a massive favor for me. Hit that like button, and then also hit that subscribe button as well if you do happen to be brand new to the channel. This is JohnJake Gaming on the mic signing off. Hope you guys are all out there having a good one. Take care, everybody.